So now we're going to do another variation of the same type of thing, but instead of the object pivoting from a fulcrum point up here, we're going to reverse it. We're going to put a fulcrum point down at the bottom. We're going to create a seaweed wagging type of an action. So it could be the tail of an animal, or in this instance here, we're doing the seaweed action. So same thing, I want you to take your paper and fold it in half. And you just need to crease the bottom of it just to find that center point. We just need an anchor point that's down here. Now, in this instance, rather than starting off on the side, what we're going to do is we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to play around with what we're doing on the sides, because you can push it as far as you want, or you can make it very subtle if you want to. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our first line going from this position here, and we're just going to arc it so that it drags just a little bit behind the center line. So it's going to end up looking something like this. So your center line runs up here. You can see how the tip point there is just off center by a bit. So I want you to draw the line nice and long, approximately this length on your sheet of paper. So we've got about 1.5 inches on the top as a space, and roughly about the same on the bottom. So equal amount of space above and below. Don't give me little teeny tiny lines about that long, because it makes it more difficult to animate later. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to plot out a path of action here on the top that's going to describe the tip point of this seaweed as it goes across. Now what I want you to do is you can decide, here's going to be our high point right here in the center. What I want you to do is just decide how far over you want to take this seaweed. Okay, the further over you take it just means the more exaggerated your action is going to be. So you don't have to take it too far. You can take it on a 45-degree angle, like line up the corner of your paper here to where your fulcrum point is, and you could pretty much cut off the end point right there if you wanted to. The further you go though, the more exaggerated it's going to be. But don't take it shorter than that corner mark, okay? So we're just going to draw a nice arc coming across here like this, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to put a loop on it, down like that, and then back up again. And again, this is a mirror assignment, so once we get back to the center point here, we're going to have the reverse of this drawing here, which we can call number 1. But we're going to have the reverse of this one, so we don't have to draw the opposite side. So you don't have to worry about drawing an arc over here and figuring it out. So once again, we have our key point that's right here. There's our end point that we're trying to track. It's going to come across here, and it's going to reach an end point right here, and then loop and come back in this direction here. So once again, we find our halfway point in this direction going across, and then we're going to get our quarter. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to slow this action down just a little bit. We're going to put a quarter in here and a quarter over here. So we're making this nice and evenly paced across here, and then we're going to start to slow down in this area right here. So we're going to do the 1/8 down to a 16th. Okay, so it comes down, loops around here, and then we're going to reverse the action and come back in this direction. We're going to use the exact same type of timing. So we can just break down this loop here the same way, like this. So if we call this drawing number 1, this will be number 2, 3, 4, 5 on the top of the loop, 6, 7 is the key position. Then coming back around, we're going to have 8, 9, 10, 3 is 11, 2 is 12, and back to number 1 is 13. So we have essentially the same timing that we did on the pendulum swing. Now again, you can alter this if you want to. You could add more in-betweens in here between 6 and 7, and 7 and 9, or 7 and 8, to slow it down just slightly. By putting it in between on each of those, it adds 2 more frames. Not a huge amount, but it could, slow it down. So what we're going to do now is we're going to figure out where is our number 7 position. Now, in this action, as it moves across, this is where you just have to sort of think about what's the action you want. You want it to be moving across like this, and at what point do you want the base to reverse action and kick it back in? Because eventually what we want to do is we want to create a snapping action on the back end. So if that's the case, we know that this snap action is going to take place on number 7. We can essentially pull our curve quite hard back around like this. So what ends up happening is we get this overlap down at the base. You get an overlap between the two drawings here that looks like this. So it's almost like the drawings are opposite each other, but not quite. Now, there's a problem with presuming something like this, in that when the seaweed comes back across in this direction, remember we have to get back up to 13, and 13 is the opposite of number 1. So if we take our number 1 drawing and we flip it over, and I'm just going to trace it off here so we can see it. You can do the same thing. Save you some time later on and label it 13 on the back side. If we place our next drawing, the drawing that was number 7 over top of it, we can see whether or not the lines are matching up. If this line here was curving too far beyond that point, we'd be in trouble. But because it's not, we're in an okay position, because as the top comes back across this way, we know that this part here is never going to overlap and go beyond it. We always want it moving in this direction the whole time. So we're okay by presuming that that position goes there. So we can call that number 7. Okay, and that's our key position on the opposite side. So now if we flip back to our number 1 drawing here and put our number 7 down, and looking back at our path of action once again, we can start dropping in our in-betweens. So our first in-between would be number 3, the halfway position. So along the path of action, as it comes across and down like this and then loops at this point, we want to find our halfway position right about there. So the line is continuously pulling across in this direction. I think we'd be safe to say that the curvature on it would look something like this. Okay, which essentially says that the bottom is pushing, and this part here is dragging, so it's pushing in this direction here. So when we look between number 1, number 1 drawing here, and this one here, you can see the action as it pulls it across. So this will be our number 3 drawing. Our number 2 in between is really, really simple. We can just do that one really quickly, because it's half the distance between those two lines. We're just mimicking that curve in there like that. We can take 1 and 2 off now, put them off to the side. Keep our 3 to 7. And now here's a subjective decision that you have to make. You have to decide at what point is the bottom going to reverse its direction. So I think in this instance here, we're pretty safe to say that it's going to be on the number 4 drawing, which is the quarter position there. If we continue the top moving in this direction here, we should probably start to reverse the direction of the bottom, just by looping it just a little bit down here. So we're keeping our tip point half the distance, but the bottom is reversing direction and only moving just slightly there. And you can see just the little amount that it's moved between those two. There's our previous drawing right there. You can see how little it's moved in that direction. So we're getting just a little bit of a turn. So that's the beginning of our overlapping action. This would be drawing number 4. Now we can take number 3 off, keeping number 7 down. Go to number 4 and now number 5. Again, we're halfway in between the tip, following that arc across there, so the tip is still going in this direction, but now we want to start to pull the bottom even further. So if you take your number 3 and put it over top of the 2 drawings that we just had there, let me just turn off this light here so you can see it a little bit better, sorry. Now can you see through the, until that turns on, you see through the drawings here? Okay, here's my crisscross point from number 3, okay. Number 5. Number 4, it's actually right there. It's just a little bit below. Let me grab my number 4 drawing here. Which one do I want? Okay, 3. So 3 and 4 are right here. There's my crisscross point right there. So I'll just put a little bit of a line through it there. Right. Now when I go from my number 4 to my number 5, the crisscross point has moved up to here. So the difference between the two of them is it's moving from here up to this point here. And what's ending up happening is we're creating a feeling that there is an energy point that has begun down at the bottom here, and it's actually traveling up the length of the spine of the seaweed. So as it moves up, it creates a roll that quivers up. And so we have to make sure that that crisscross point where the two of them meet is constantly in a position of moving out to the tip. All right? And it's like the crest of a wave. I'll show it to you once we've finished off the in-betweens. You'll see it a little bit better once I've done that. So we take off 4 and 3, keep our number 5 drawing down. And now we're into number 6. So with number 6, we pretty much have to stick with a halfway in between here. So we want to go half the distance here, but we also want to pull this so it's going half the distance in here as well. So on the previous ones, we were just going a little bit each time. This one here, we want to make sure it goes half the distance. So we're going to create this really nice S curve running through the spine. And now our crisscross point has now moved up to here. So you can see it was here, now it's moved up to here. And then what happens is in number 7, it essentially moves to the very tip of the line, and it snaps off the end. So now if I take my drawings and put them in order, so the action. So the tip continues to move to the left, but now the bottom reverses direction and comes out. And you can see that little cross line that I put on it is moving up the length of the spine. Okay, so it's traveling up and snapping out. So now what we want to do is we want to go from number 7 to 13, which is number 1 reversed. This one to this one. And so we've got to find our halfway position, which on our timing chart was number 11. Take a blank sheet of paper. This will be number 11. So we find that halfway point. So I can quickly do number 12. I'm just working in reverse. position there. Take off my number 13. Leaving number 7 down on the bottom. Now I'm going to do 10. I'm working backwards. Find the halfway point on the tip, about there. Again, you can see the advantage of having your disc being able to rotate it. Just makes it easier to draw that curve. Number 9. Half the distance between the 2 points. And then finally number 8. Oops. Okay, and that finishes off that half of the cycle. So we'll take a look at it. Flip. Number 1. Oh, my number 1 is 13, so I'll just be missing that one. So it's just a